Trump won because he won 107,000 votes in 3 Rust Belt states. Is that a fluke? You know, it isn't a fluke. Geography matters in United States politics. So if you look at the 2016 Electoral College map, what you see is blue coasts, blue dots, but an ocean of red in between. Clinton, of course, won the popular vote, but that's not what matters. And the Electoral College overweights the votes of rural and Rust Belt whites. And so does the Senate, because the state with the least population and the state with the most population, they both just get 2 senators. And state legislatures also matter a tremendous amount in the US. Republicans currently hold 33. If they hold 1 more, they could actually call a constitutional convention. And state legislatures, of course, they control redistricting, which determines control of the House of Representatives. And state legislatures also have a very profound effect on American public policy. So, for example, in that ocean of red, 80% of American counties have no abortion provider, not a single one. So, ignoring the ocean of red, it just isn't working. We voted with our middle finger, said one Trump South Carolina voter. This is what's been called the rage or revenge of the white working class. What happened? It reflects the economic pain of rural and Rust Belt Americans. So Clinton won actually fewer than 500 counties, but those counties represent 2/3 of economic activity in the US. Trump won over 2,600 counties, but those counties, they represent only 1/3 of economic activity. Here's what happened. We did globalization wrong, and the result was the hollowing out of the American middle class. And 2 statistics really say it all. Wages used to rise when productivity did, until the 1970s. You know, if that still held true today, wages would be double what they are. And the result is that you have, for many American families, the demise of the American dream. So virtually all Americans born in the 1940s did better than their parents. But today, it's actually less than half. And many Americans fear things will get worse. 76% of Americans believe that automation will worsen economic inequality. So who's providing an explanation for all of this? Well, Breitbart is. Why did we lose good jobs? They went overseas because of trade treaties. Why are the new jobs so low paid? It's because immigrants are driving down wages. And what's the solution? A huge tax cut for the wealth creators, for the job creators. All of this is taking American politics to some pretty dark places. You know, there was a study of blue-collar guys around New York City in the 1990s, and they found that they were actually quite positive towards immigrants, hard workers, just like us. And environmental issues used to command very broad bipartisan appeal in the 1970s and 1980s. What flipped both issues was that they were connected to the loss of jobs. So what role can Silicon Valley play in turning this around? And here I'm going to rely on a recent study of the politics of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs by a group at Stanford. Silicon Valley has an odd combination. In some ways, it's to the left of the left, similar to Democratic donors, very liberal on social issues, on environmental issues, immigration, and redistribution. But in other ways, it's kind of to the right of the right, very similar to Republican donors, very conservative on other issues, very anti-union, for example, and in the belief that wide income disparity is okay if that's what's necessary to fuel economic growth. That combination of beliefs is pretty much guaranteed to really deeply alienate the white working class. So let's look at this issue by issue. Let's start with social issues. Now, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are very pro-marriage equality and very pro-abortion rights. And that makes sense because it reflects their felt entitlement to self-development through love and through work. But in blue and pink collar jobs, people don't feel entitled to self-development, and it's not on offer. What they seek is stability through self-discipline, the kind that gets you up every day and to work on time without an attitude to an often not very fulfilling job. And so they very highly value the institutions that anchor self-discipline, traditional family values, traditional religion. And so the culture wars that have been going on in the United States for 40 years, they reflect class divisions, that division between self-development and self-discipline. How about immigration? Silicon Valley entrepreneurs actually think we should have more immigration, and they don't think trade treaties should prioritize American jobs. But to people in that ocean of red, looking at rusting factories, that belief just strikes them as kind of a puzzling and hurtful lack of social solidarity. And things are made worse by an unself-conscious double standard. So, for example, immigrants, they're dreamers. They're viewed through a very empathetic human rights lens. But the white working class, they're viewed through a very different lens, kind of neoliberal. The race is to the swift, and you're not it. Homer Simpson lens, stupid and fat. And that also exacerbates the conflict around immigration in this country. Let's look at redistributive programs. Here, Silicon Valley is quite idealistic. They believe in higher taxes on the rich and redistributive programs for the poor. But those kinds of means-tested programs tightly targeted to the poor, they're very unpopular in blue-collar families because that means the poor get benefits and the blue-collar families, often just a small notch above, get nothing. But at a deeper level, working-class whites are very judgmental of people who take what they see as handouts. So, for example, Jennifer Sherman's study of rural California in the Central Valley found one family who had lost a job, so they had to sign up for food stamps, for SNAP. They were so embarrassed at having to take a handout that they actually drove 2 hours away from their house to get and spend the food stamps. And so in this kind of context, things like the guaranteed annual income, which is very popular in Silicon Valley and very idealistic, would be seen as a condescending handout. And so how can Silicon Valley connect? I mean, they're not going to gang up on gays and immigrants, and they're not going to abandon their concern about climate change. What they can do, though, is to connect around a shared value. And that shared value is social honor through work. Because the white working class just want what Silicon Valley already has, which is the ability to work hard and create a good life for your family. That's the key. Silicon Valley has to actually care about creating good jobs for the 2/3 of Americans who lack college degrees. But, you know, the first step, it's a really easy one, is just to stop insulting people. So terms like plumber's butt, flyover states, they're just class insults that pass for wit. And even the Homer Simpson stereotype, stupid and fat and here literally drooling, we need to lose them all. Class slurs should be as stigmatized as racial slurs. And then we need to focus on jobs. For those who own companies, it's important to hire for skills, not just for degrees. Look, I have degrees from Yale, Harvard, and MIT. So I totally get the whole Stanford thing. I know, I'm in Silicon Valley. But if you look at Americans by household income, if you look at the 3 middle quintiles by household income, only 3% of those kids go to highly elite schools. So if you're hiring only from those schools, you're hiring from a very narrow range of families. And so there are now a growing number of companies, gap jumpers and others, that will help you identify the skills that you need and to hire through skills assessments people who have those skills. And Google is doing much the same thing, focusing on skills assessment. And what they're finding is that they hire some very bright people from community college and even who are just high school grads. The second is really a huge business opportunity, and that's to create companies that train today's workers for tomorrow's jobs. Because according to one estimate, 32% of American workers will have to change occupational categories as a result of automation. And you know and I know, they're going to have to change often more than once, 2 and 3 times, retrain in the course of a lifetime. And so what's needed are companies that can work with local employers to help them identify the skills they need and develop certificate programs that the employers trust. A hugely important social impact business opportunity. And this is important not just for small companies, but for large legacy companies. And here a model is the partnership between Udacity and AT&T, where together they created open-sourced content available to AT&T workers to train them for tomorrow's jobs. But in many ways, the most important is to use automation to upskill jobs. And here's an example. In New York, they ran a pilot where they gave to nurses' aides a simple iPad that was preloaded with 15 health screening conditions. And that way the aides could do the health screening and get the information immediately to doctors. What they found in the pilot is that it improved medical outcomes, it decreased healthcare costs, and properly handled, that's exactly the kind of upskilling that can bring someone's job up to a level where it can sustain a middle-class wage. That's an amazingly important model. And with things like 3D printing, in that ocean of red, people in this room could be inventing niche products and companies that would, for example, be able to produce customized prosthetics and sell them from Indiana. And that's important because about 5% of jobs, it's true, will be lost to automation, and that's what we're mostly hearing about. But what we need to understand is that according to one estimate, 60% of jobs will involve interaction between humans and robots. And we have to use that new generation of jobs to upskill them in an important way. And then that company in Indiana producing those customized prosthetics, they should be able to market them to the world because 95% of potential customers are outside of the US. And it used to be the only companies who could reach those customers were large multinationals. But that's no longer true today. Things like eBay and Etsy, they're just the beginning. What we need is the invention of new platforms that will allow that company in Indiana, whether it's selling prosthetics or customized blue jeans, to reach their very broad range of customers. And there's some companies like this, but there need to be a lot more. And once you invent programs for what are now being called micro-multinationals, you could be marketing not just goods, but also services through things like augmented reality devices, for example, and through the use of holograms. An electrician in Alabama could analyze the problem with a factory in China and guide locals on how to fix it. All of these new companies, though, and the old ones too, need to rethink the notion of core competencies. It sounds so good. We only do what we do best. But what it has become is a way to justify only caring about creating good jobs for people at the top of the food chain. You know, that didn't used to be the philosophy of American business. So, for example, if you look at Kodak's annual report from 1990, on page 2, A Place of Pride, they talk about the number of jobs created. They even talk about the amount of wages paid and benefits paid as one of the key accomplishments of the company. If you compare the last annual report published by Apple, same place of Pride, page 2, nothing like that. They talk about their cash position. So we need to add a stakeholder, employees, and to recognize that if the company takes care of the employees will take care of the customers. And then the customers, of course, will take care of the shareholders, who in turn, in a virtuous circle, will take care of the employees. That's the virtuous circle that we need to be moving towards. And we need to bring the jobs where the people are. Because in that ocean of red, they're not going to move here any more than we're going to move to Alabama. For good and sufficient reasons also. These are two-job families. They need to find not just one better job, they need to find two better jobs. And they need to find two jobs that are so much better that the fact that they're now going to be paying for child care, elder care, and a lot of other things that their dense, rooted, localized network of family and friends can't give them any longer for free, they still need to come out ahead. They are not going to move. But through all of these new technologies, that does not matter as much now, because we can be creating companies in the heartland. So Silicon Valley, in many ways, is so perfectly placed to help drain the venom from American politics and replace it with hope. You know, we did globalization wrong, but let's do automation right. That's how Silicon Valley can disrupt American politics. Thank you.